I don't really know where to start, except maybe with the coffee. Every Wednesday morning, before class, I'd sit at the corner table of a small cafe near the bus stop. Nothing special about it. Wobbly chairs, chalkboard menu that never changed, but it was quiet enough that nobody noticed if I lingered. I usually killed an hour there, scrolling half-heartedly through my phone, typing out messages to people I'd never sent, just to see the words, just to feel like maybe I could still talk to someone if I wanted to. That's where she walked in the first time. My friend's mom, Mrs. Hale. It wasn't like in the movies. No slow motion, no dramatic music. She just ordered a latte, tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and looked over while waiting. Recognition came late, like a memory surfacing. When her eyes met mine, she smiled, surprised, warm, not forced. "Don't you usually drink the Americano?" she asked, glancing at my table. I almost laughed. She remembered. I barely remembered myself. "Yeah," I said, shifting in my seat. "Guess I'm predictable." "Nothing wrong with that," she murmured, and then her drink was ready. She didn't leave right away. Instead, she settled at the table across from me, the one with the uneven leg. I watched her press down on it gently, testing the wobble, then slide a napkin under the corner like she'd done it before. I don't know why that stuck with me, but it did. How naturally she fixed something small, without asking anyone else. We talked in fragments, not the way you do with people your own age. There were pauses, and sometimes she'd look past me like she was weighing whether to say more. She asked about school, about how her son was doing in class. I told her fine, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. She nodded like she understood more than I said. Somewhere in the middle of our half-hour conversation, I noticed her hands. Not in the obvious way, just the way her thumb smoothed over the paper sleeve of her cup, tracing circles without thinking. My eyes kept flicking down to it, then away, hoping she didn't notice. When she did finally gather her things, she hesitated, like there was something else she could have added but didn't. She only said, "Well, maybe I'll see you here again." And then she was gone, coat trailing after her, leaving me staring at the seat she'd steadied with a napkin. I didn't see her for 2 more weeks. I thought maybe it had been a one-time coincidence, a flicker in the middle of my otherwise quiet routine. I went back to typing messages I'd never send, to no one in particular. The cafe felt emptier than before, though. Then, one evening, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was her. The text was simple, casual. "Don't tell my son, but I think you're better company. Coffee again sometime." I must have read it 10 times, sitting alone in my room with the light of the screen against the wall. And for the first time in weeks, I typed out a reply I didn't delete. Her text kept looping in my head long after I sent my reply. "Coffee again sometime?" We did meet again. Not the very next day, but soon enough that it felt like neither of us had wanted to wait too long. The cafe was busier that morning, the clatter of cups and hiss of milk steaming filling the gaps between our words. She slipped into the seat across from me like she'd done it 100 times. I noticed she never asked if the chair was taken. She just assumed, somehow, that it was meant for her. "You're early," she said, shrugging off her coat. I was already here, I admitted. I hadn't meant it to sound like waiting, but it did. She smiled faintly and stirred her tea with the small wooden stick, even though the bag had already sunk to the bottom. She always ordered tea. I hadn't realized how much I'd noticed until then. Conversation wandered. She mentioned how quiet the house felt lately since her son had been out most nights. I nodded, not sure if I should say I'd noticed the same about myself. She didn't ask, and I didn't tell. But the silence after was comfortable in its own strange way. At one point, I asked, "Do you ever miss before? Like when everything felt less complicated?" She finished for me, looking into her cup. She exhaled through her nose. "All the time." She told me a small memory then, about walking to school with her son when he was little, how he would stop at every crack in the sidewalk to balance on the edge like it mattered. "He doesn't remember it," she said, shaking her head. "But I do. Funny how that works." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened, tracing the rim of my mug with a finger. Something in her voice, quiet and unfinished, made me feel like I wasn't supposed to answer anyway. We drifted into other topics, light and easy, but the moment stuck with me. Her words had settled somewhere deep, like an anchor. After that, it became a pattern. Not every day, not scheduled, but we kept finding each other. Sometimes it was coffee, sometimes a brief stop on the street if we happened to cross paths. One evening, when it started raining hard, she offered me a ride home. The car smelled faintly of lavender and something else I couldn't place. She drove carefully, one hand resting loosely on the wheel, the other tapping the turn signal a moment too early. I found myself imagining what it would be like to sit in that seat every day, listening to the radio. She left low enough to hear, but not enough to sing along. I hated myself a little for the thought, because it wasn't lost on me. Who she was, who I was. The line was clear. My friend's mom. Mid-40s. Divorced, though I only learned that from the absence of a ring and the way she once said, "It's just me now," when talking about the house. And me, barely old enough to call myself anything. Still, I kept showing up, and she kept letting me. The doubt came in flashes. When her hand brushed mine while passing a napkin. When she laughed too softly at something I said. When I caught myself wondering what she looked like when she wasn't holding herself together so carefully. One afternoon, we sat in her kitchen because the cafe had been too crowded. She made tea for herself, coffee for me. The kettle whistled, and the sound seemed too loud for such a small room. We sat at the table, steam rising between us. The only sound was the ticking clock above the fridge. My phone buzzed once, probably a group chat. I ignored it. She reached over without thinking, slid the mug a little closer to me when she noticed I hadn't touched it. Her fingers brushed mine just barely, almost accidental. But it didn't feel accidental. She looked at me then, held my eyes for a second longer than necessary. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It was becoming too easy. The coffees, the rides, the quiet afternoons in her kitchen that stretched longer than either of us admitted. But then something shifted. One Thursday, she wasn't at the cafe. I sat there, waiting longer than usual, scrolling through my phone just to have an excuse to stay. She didn't come. The napkin under the wobbly chair was still there, folded and creased, but she wasn't. The next time I saw her, it was at her house. Her son had forgotten a book, and I stopped by to drop it off. She opened the door, hair pulled back, no makeup this time. Different. Softer. "Oh, it's you," she said, stepping aside. "Come in for a minute. He'll be back soon." Her voice sounded careful. Not cold, but distant in a way I hadn't felt before. We sat in the living room, the muted TV flashing colors no one was watching. She fiddled with the hem of her sweater, twisting the fabric, then letting it go. "Busy week?" I asked just to fill the air. "Something like that," she murmured. Her eyes flicked toward the clock, then back to me. I felt it then, the resistance, like she'd built a small wall overnight. Not enough to keep me out completely, but enough to make me hesitate. I kept catching myself studying the room, the framed pictures, the half-empty cup on the coffee table, just to avoid staring at her too long. And then, footsteps outside. The door clicked. Her son's voice carried in, casual, unaware. She shot me a look, almost warning, and I understood before she spoke. "Another time," she whispered, just as he came in, tossing his keys on the counter. I nodded, stood too quickly, muttered something about heading out. He barely noticed me leaving. But she did. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A short message, "Sorry. Today was complicated." I typed out 3 different replies. Deleted them all. Finally sent just, "I get it." The next time we met, it was back in the cafe. Neutral ground again. We both pretended nothing had changed, though it had. She reached for the sugar, and so did I. Our hands brushed. She didn't move hers right away. Neither did I. For a second, the whole room narrowed down to that touch, her fingers warm against mine. Her lips parted like she was about to say something. My throat went dry, and then she pulled back, smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We shouldn't," she started, then stopped. The words hung there, unfinished, heavy. I didn't push. Couldn't. But when she stood to leave, she lingered, her hand resting lightly on the back of my chair, as if it belonged there. And when she finally walked away, I knew we'd both almost crossed a line neither of us had named out loud. It was late afternoon when we ended up walking together. Not planned. Just one of those coincidences that felt too heavy to call coincidence anymore. I was heading back from class. She was coming from the grocery store, a single bag looped over her arm. "You're out late," she said, adjusting the strap. "Yeah. Stayed behind, trying to catch up." My voice felt casual, though inside it wasn't. We fell in a step. The street was narrow, lined with trees shedding the last of their leaves. The air smelled faintly of rain, though it hadn't started yet. She shifted the bag higher on her shoulder, and I instinctively reached out. "Here, let me." "It's fine," she said, but didn't stop me. I took the bag, lighter than I expected. Still, carrying it made me feel involved somehow. We found a bench near the park and sat, the bag between us. She rubbed her hands together, though it wasn't cold. For a long while, we just watched the quiet street, people passing in pairs, always in pairs. I wanted to say something. She did too. I could feel it in the way she kept inhaling like she'd start, then exhaling instead. Finally, she asked, "Do your friends know you sit with me like this?" I swallowed. "No. Do you want them to?" Her laugh was soft, short, without humor. "Of course not. Can you imagine?" She shook her head. "I shouldn't even be here." The words landed heavier than she probably meant. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the pavement. "Then why are you?" That made her pause. Her fingers traced the seam of her jeans, slow, distracted. "Because," she stopped. Shook her head. "Because it feels easy with you. And I don't have a lot of easy anymore." The silence after stretched. My chest tightened. I wanted to ask easy how, but I already knew. Something sharp cut through me. Jealousy, sudden and uninvited. Not of anyone in particular, but of the life she had before, the people who got this side of her without having to steal it in secret. "Sometimes I wish," I stopped. The words caught, raw and dangerous. Her eyes flicked toward me, waiting. "I wish I'd met you not like this. Not as someone's mom. Just," I gestured vaguely at the air. "As you." Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because it's unfair," she whispered. "To you. To me. To everyone." I wanted to argue. To tell her it didn't feel unfair. It felt true. But my throat closed around the thought. She leaned back, eyes on the sky now turning gray. "Do you know what scares me?" I shook my head. "That I'll want more than this. More than I should." The bag between us might as well have been a wall. My hand twitched, wanting to close the space, but I stayed still. Her voice softened, almost breaking. "And what scares you?" I forced a breath. Looked at her profile, the curve of her jaw, the small line between her brows. That you'll wake up one day and decide none of this ever mattered. That I was just a mistake you didn't mean to make. Her eyes finally turned back to mine. And for the first time, there was no carefulness, no practiced distance. Just raw, unguarded truth. We sat there, the whole park fading around us, until it felt like the only two people left in the world were the ones holding back everything they couldn't say. Her hand shifted on the bench, close enough I could feel the warmth radiating from it. I inched my fingers forward, then stopped. She noticed. I knew she noticed. For a long moment, neither of us breathed. And then she asked, so quietly I almost missed it, "What are we doing?" After that afternoon on the bench, I thought something would change. Maybe not in the way stories usually go, but in some small, undeniable way. Instead, she disappeared. Not completely, just from me. No texts, no coffee shop. When I walked past her house, the blinds were drawn, the car in the driveway, but no sign of her. A ghost of a life I knew was still moving, only with the door closed. At first, I told myself she was busy. Work, errands, her own world. But days stretched into weeks, and the excuses I made for her sounded thinner each time. I still went to the cafe, same corner table, Americano cooling too fast. The napkin under the wobbly chair was gone, replaced by a folded sugar packet someone else must have left there. Her absence sat across from me like a shadow. One morning, her son slid into the seat instead. He was late for class, muttering about deadlines. He didn't notice the way my eyes kept darting to the door, waiting for someone else. "Mom's been weird lately," he said, tapping at his phone. "Keeps turning down plans with people. even with me. He laughed lightly, like it wasn't serious. Maybe she's seeing someone. The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. Maybe. That night, I almost texted her. I wrote, "Are you okay?" and stared at the glowing screen. Then I deleted it. Rewrote, "I miss our talks." Deleted that too. My fingers hovered, but I couldn't send anything that might expose what was already too exposed. 2 more weeks. Silence thickened into something heavier, resentment, maybe, or fear. I caught myself scrolling through our old messages, so few of them, trying to read meaning into the dots and pauses. Then, one evening, she showed up. Not at the cafe, not at her house, but at the grocery store where I worked part-time. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She was walking fast, hair tied back carelessly, eyes somewhere far away. She stopped short when she saw me. "Oh," she said, as if she hadn't prepared for the possibility. "Hi," I managed. My hands were still on the scanner, frozen mid-shift. She set down a basket, just bread, tea, apples. The kind of things you buy when you're only shopping for yourself. "You've been," I trailed off. I wanted to say gone, but that sounded like accusation. "Busy," she answered quickly. Too quickly. We didn't look at each other as I rang her up. The beep of the scanner filled the silence. When I handed her the bag, her fingers brushed mine, but this time it didn't linger. She pulled back fast, as if burned. "Take care," she said softly. And then she was gone, sliding through the automatic doors before I could ask what she meant. That night, I found myself walking toward her street. I stopped at the end of the block, her house dim, only one light glowing in the kitchen. My hand curled into a fist, then relaxed. I stood there too long, rehearsing sentences in my head I knew I'd never use. I didn't knock. Back home, I sat on my bed with my phone in hand. I typed one last message. "I don't know what we're doing, but it matters to me." I stared at it until the words blurred. My thumb hovered over send. Then I locked the screen. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that it wasn't planned. I wasn't supposed to be there. But one evening, on my way home, I saw her porch light on and something in me refused to keep walking. The pause had gone on too long. I felt suspended, like a word caught in my throat, and if I didn't do something soon, it would vanish forever. I told myself I'd just knock. Just say hi. Nothing more. She opened the door slower than I expected, like she'd been deciding whether or not to answer. Her hair was loose, a sweater draped around her shoulders. She looked tired, not in a way that ruined her, but in a way that made her feel unbearably real. "Oh," she said, her voice thin. "You." "Me." I tried to smile, but it faltered. I wanted to see if you were okay." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she stepped aside. "Come in. Just for a minute." The kitchen light was on, casting a soft yellow glow. A kettle rested on the stove, still warm. She gestured vaguely. "Tea." "Sure." The sound of the water pouring was louder than it should have been. We stood at opposite ends of the counter, her back to me as she stirred. My eyes wandered to the fridge covered in magnets, the small pile of unopened mail, the curve of her shoulder. Finally, I said it. "You disappeared." Her stirring slowed. She didn't turn around. I had to. "Why?" She set the spoon down, leaned on the counter, still facing away. "Because I was starting to want things I shouldn't." And that scared me. The words landed heavy, but they didn't surprise me. I already knew. I stepped closer, not too close. "You think I wasn't?" That made her glance back. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "You're young. You'll move on. You'll find someone who..." "Don't." I cut in, sharper than I meant. "Don't tell me what I'll do. You don't know." The silence stretched again. She finally turned, leaning against the counter now, facing me fully. Her arms crossed, but not defensively, more like she was holding herself together. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Maybe not. But I am." We stood like that, words and silence stacked on top of each other, daring one of us to break. Then she sighed, a sound that seemed to carry years in it. "Do you know how long it's been since someone looked at me like I was more than just someone's mom?" Her voice cracked at the end, just slightly. I felt something tighten in my chest. I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. "Not yet. Do you know how long it's been since someone actually saw me?" like really saw me. Her arms dropped to her sides. The air between us felt thin, fragile. "We can't," she said, but it didn't sound like conviction. It sounded like fear. "I know," I admitted, "but I don't want to pretend it's not there." The kettle clicked as it cooled, filling the silence with a small, final sound. She stepped forward then, just slightly, close enough that I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the faint tremble in her hands. Her gaze lifted, uncertain, holding mine as if it might break us both. For a second, I thought we would cross it, the line we'd circled for so long. But instead, she just reached out, laid her hand gently over mine on the counter. Warm, steady, nothing more. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but all she said was, "Okay." And somehow, that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single night when everything shifted. No fireworks, no declarations. It was slower, quieter, like water wearing down stone. Weeks passed, and we found our way back into each other's routines. Not every day, but enough. The cafe again, sometimes her kitchen, sometimes just a walk after dusk when the streets felt emptier. It wasn't about what we said. It was about what stayed. She still ordered tea. I still ordered black coffee. She still teased me for making a face every time it cooled too fast. I still noticed the way her thumbs circled the rim of her cup when she was thinking. The pauses between us grew softer. Less like barriers, more like spaces where trust could sit. One morning, months later, we met at the park again. Same bench, same crooked tree nearby. She had a thermos this time, poured tea into a small cup, handed it to me without asking. I took it, even though it wasn't what I usually drank. She smiled. "You'll live." I pretended to gag, which made her laugh, a sound that filled the cold air with something warmer. We sat there a long time. No rush, no fear of being caught. Just two people who had stopped running from themselves. Her son never asked questions. Maybe he didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. Either way, we never spoke of it. Some things don't need explanations. I started showing up less at the cafe alone, because I wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes we still went, sometimes we didn't. The point wasn't the place, it was the pattern. The rhythm we'd carved quietly, until it felt less like an accident and more like something solid. Once, she looked at me across her kitchen table and said, almost to herself, "You know, it's 8:47. I frowned. "Okay." She shrugged. "It's the time I always notice the clock. Don't know why. Just do." It became a kind of private joke. Whenever we noticed the time, 8:47 morning, 8:47 night, we'd catch each other's eyes, smile, say nothing. It didn't mean anything. Or maybe it meant everything. Life didn't suddenly fix itself. She still carried old hurts. I still felt too young some days, too unsteady. But together, we weren't paused anymore. One evening, as I was leaving her house, I stopped at the door. She leaned against the frame, watching me tie my shoes like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. "You know this isn't simple," she said quietly. "I know." Her hand brushed my shoulder as I stood. Not heavy, not claiming, just there. Warm. And for once, there was no hesitation. No unsent text. No silence heavy with doubt. Just the kind of peace that sneaks up on you when you stop expecting it. We didn't call it love. We didn't call it anything. But it was ours. And when I think back now, coffee cooling too fast, her fixing the wobble of that cafe chair with a folded napkin, the way she whispered okay in her kitchen, it all adds up to something I can't quite name, but I don't need to. Because she knows too. We're both still here.